Ok. Bem, pessoal, nós vamos dar prosseguimento aqui, tá certo? A gente não ficar muito atrasado, mas só para chamar mais gente para cá, né? Se você ainda não está aqui no palco, né, e você quer saber o que acontece quando você dá a oportunidade para crianças, muitas vezes crianças carentes, de ter acesso à computação, ter acesso à internet, o que acontece? Né? O Instituto Campus Party está tendo essa experiência. Nós estamos treinando aqui do outro lado, aqui na área Expo, cerca de 5.000 pessoas. A grande maioria dessas crianças que nunca tiveram contato com computação, com informática, nós estamos treinando eles, tá certo? E o nosso palestrante aqui, né, Sugata Mitra, vai falar um pouco sobre isso, tá certo? Mas vamos dar um prosseguimento aqui na palestra. Antes de mais nada, eu queria apresentar a presidente do Instituto Vivo Telefônica, Françoise Trapenat. O Instituto Vivo Telefônica, ou Telefônica Vivo?
Telefônica Vivo.
O Instituto, desculpa, estou errando aqui, o Instituto Telefônica Vivo, né, é uma instituição sem fins lucrativos que está colaborando muito com o nosso evento. Tem vários e vários voluntários do Instituto Telefônica Vivo aqui presentes no evento, nos ajudando a isso acontecer. Françoise, muito obrigado pela sua participação.
Gente, boa noite a todos. Essa palestra aqui, eu não grito como ele, tá dando para vocês ouvirem ou não, tá? Eu não trouxe uma caixa acústica comigo aqui. Essa palestra do professor Sugata Mitra oficialmente abre dentro da Campus Party o que a gente está chamando de Educa Party. O que é isso? Nós estamos trazendo aqui para dentro da campus 250 professores, pedagogos, universitários do mundo da educação, para entender e debater e discutir e fazer oficinas a respeito desse encontro que é essa cultura digital, esse mundo que nós estamos vivendo, e o que isso tem a ver com a educação. Que outros modelos de educação podem emergir, precisam emergir nessa nova sociedade conectada que nós estamos vivendo. Para isso, e para dar início a esse momento inicial da Educa Party aqui dentro, que vai durar até sexta-feira, nós convidamos o professor Sugata Mitra. O professor Sugata Mitra trabalha na Newcastle University, na Inglaterra, e também colabora com o Media Lab, no MIT, e ele é provavelmente o maior pesquisador sobre tecnologias educacionais. E ele vai contar para a gente, um pouco resumidamente, o que tem sido os seus últimos 15 anos de pesquisa, quais são os seus principais achados e para onde ele acredita que a educação, nesta cultura digital, precisa evoluir para dar conta desse mundo que está emergindo. Então, a gente da Fundação Telefônica Vivo está muito feliz e muito honrado de tê-lo trazido aqui para o Brasil e de estar podendo, inclusive, patrocinar um experimento que ele fez hoje de manhã, no Parque Santo Antônio, na região sul de São Paulo, num projeto que a gente apoia na Casa do Zezinho, com crianças aqui do Brasil, e vai poder contar um pouquinho para vocês essas experiências de aprendizagem autônoma com computador, que é o que ele está estudando. Eu não vou atravessar a palestra dele, eu sei que vocês querem ouvi-lo, então é com muita honra que eu apresento a vocês o professor Sugata Mitra. Por favor, professor.
Okay. Thank you. I don't know what she said. I hope she didn't say anything terrible. I'm going to talk about school. And, you know, school is not a very exciting topic. So I thought before I actually talk about technology, why don't I talk a little bit about where did schools come from? I tried searching a little bit about the history of schools. Who decided that there has to be classrooms, there has to be students sitting in rows, there has to be a teacher? When did it start? I think it started about 5,000 years ago in Central Asia. We don't know much about that, but what we do know is from 2,500 years ago from Greece. And we have a professor called Professor Socrates, who used to teach at that time, and his method was to get 4 or 5 students together and ask them a question. And if the students said, we don't know the answer, then Socrates said, why don't you try and figure it out amongst yourselves? He did this for a couple of years, and the Greek government decided that this was not a very good method, so they killed him. His best student, Plato, wrote up this history and decided that being Professor Socrates is not a very good idea. So he said, no, the teacher has to actually say something to the students. And he set up a classroom. Plato's best student was a man called Aristotle. And Aristotle invented physics, because of which all of us are here. But at that time, the Greek government decided that, studying things, how they fall and how they rise, is not such an exciting idea. So they told Aristotle, why don't you take some children and teach them to be soldiers? Aristotle opened an academy and produced a very good student whom all of us know. His name was Mr. Alexander. And he went on to win half of the earth. So then everybody thought, well, this is a really cool method. Take a bunch of kids, take one old man, and you produce Alexander. That's how we got to schooling. Jump ahead 1,000 years, and the Victorians were ruling the planet. The Victorians had problems like, we need 500 trained soldiers in Ghana in 3 months' time. This is the curriculum. Here is a stick. Produce exactly identical 500 people. That method worked very well for the Victorians. And later, when the Industrial Revolution started, the industry leaders thought, this is a wonderful way to produce factory workers, because all of them have to be identical. But then, the industries disappeared and went off to China. We are left with that old system. What shall we do about it? Well, let's take a look. This is how students today look at the education. There are things that are interesting and things that are uninteresting. There are things that are relevant and things that are irrelevant. Gives us 4 boxes. Most people think that the curriculum of the current school is uninteresting and irrelevant. So when you walk into a classroom and say, I'm going to teach you the tangent of an angle, most people say, can you please not do that? However, there is another box, which is the box of things that are interesting and things that are relevant. And that's what Campus Party is about. That's about gadgets, cool stuff, and interesting applications. Nobody teaches that in school because you don't need to teach that in school. That just happens, like it's happening here. There is just one thing which is relevant but not at all interesting, which unfortunately are examinations. You have to pass them because otherwise you don't get a job. And there is one fascinating box. Things that are interesting but not relevant. Okay, what's an example of a thing that is interesting but not relevant? Well, Avatar. I mean, you watch it, you love it, you would quite happily skip school and go and see it because it's interesting. Who cares if it's relevant or not? Games and entertainment fall under things that are interesting but not relevant. Human beings like very much things that are interesting but not particularly relevant. For example, big questions. Why did we lose our tail when we became human? There are very few people who would say, I don't want to know. They would say, yeah, that's interesting. I'd like to know, although it doesn't really matter whether I have one or not. But then, we like big questions. When will the sun explode? Well, it's going to happen 4 billion years from now, but we still want to know. And we want to know how, and what's going to happen then, and so on. Interesting, but irrelevant. If somehow we could change the curriculum into interesting but not relevant questions, how would children react? I'm going to show you that in a moment. In 1999, in India, there were many children who neither had computers nor had teachers to teach them how to use computers. In those days, computers used to be taught. A teacher used to say, this is a monitor, this is a keyboard, this is called a mouse. And we didn't have teachers who would teach all that to children. I didn't like that very much. So I decided that I would give a computer to children in a slum, just to see what happens. The problem is, how do you give a computer in a slum? You can't put it on a table in the middle of the slum because, it'll disappear. The only people who put computers outdoors, even today, are banks. The ATM is a computer which stands on the street. So I copied the design of the ATM in 1999, 13 years ago, and I built myself a DIY ATM. There it is. It was 3 feet off the ground. It was running, in those days, the highest internet I could get, 2 Mbps. It had a nice big screen. It was running Windows. It had the Alta Vista search engine on it. I turned it on and I left it there. And people said that you will find it broken and you'll find that it has disappeared in a matter of hours. What happened in a matter of hours was very different. We found children who had never seen a computer before, never heard of the internet, and who did not know English, were surfing on the web and teaching each other how to surf. Here's a picture of the first day. That computer got called the hole in the wall. The little boy on your right is 8 years old, and to his left is his student. She is 6. And he is teaching her how to browse. We didn't understand at that time what was happening. Who taught them? So I took the, people said, this can't be magic. Somebody must have been passing by and showed them how to use the mouse. So I thought, well, in that case, I have to test this in another village, which is so remote that the chances of a passing software engineer would be 0. I found the village and I put in a computer over there. After 3 months, I went back and I found children playing games on the computer. And when they saw me, they said, we need a faster processor and a better mouse. So I asked them, who told you all this? And they said, well, you gave us a computer that works only in English, so we taught ourselves English to use it. I thought, well, so they can teach themselves how to use a computer, that's one thing, but what's this? They can teach themselves English? So I repeated the experiment. I got some funding from the World Bank, who thought it was too good to be true, to test out 2 things. Will this happen everywhere? And what is the simplest engineering that you need in order to keep a computer operating outdoors anywhere? It took 3 years to find that out. The technology turned out to be fairly simple. You have you take a small piece of wall, you make holes in that, put glass panes, put the computer monitors behind the glass panes, make a slit for the keyboard, cover the keyboard with a cowl, and keep a gap in the cowl such that only small hands can go in, because otherwise the adults will come in and use it. We invented a solid-state mouse because the regular mouse gets pulled out. So we had a solid-state mouse. In those days touchpads were very expensive. We had an enclosure behind, inside which the CPUs were kept, and we had environment sensors which would sense the temperature, the humidity levels, and the current consumption of each CPU. We needed the current consumption of each CPU because if we saw a repetitive signal, a repetitive set of currents going on and on and on without stopping, then we know that the computer has gone into a hang, and we would use a hardware switch which automatically would boot it, because otherwise we would have to fly 3,000 kilometers to go and push the reset button. So we had an anti-hang piece of hardware. We had VSAT antennas to provide the internet, and we had 5 hours of power backup from an inverter. We had a web camera, we had a microphone. So we had all of these sensors. We had a web camera. Now I'm very proud of this picture because remember, this is 2001. Web cameras were very expensive. So we had to build the web camera. We actually bought the lens, made the circuit, and then built the web camera. So that's why you see this girl holding the web camera in her hand with a 1 rupee coin next to it. We built monitoring software which can sense the state of the PC. So sitting in my office in New Delhi, I could see what was the history log on each of these machines. I could see what was going on the screens of each of these machines, not in real time, but with a 2 or 3 minutes gap. I could see who were the children who were in front of that computer, and then put the picture together to say, well, this is what is going on. Here's a picture of those years. We started up in the Himalayas, very cold, very dry.
Each abortion gets 5 to the...
Then to Western India, into the desert, very hot, very dusty. CPUs stopped working at about 52 degrees centigrade, and temperatures would go up over that. Central India, very hot, tropical, with salty air, which would deposit in the connectors and stop the computer. We had to solve that problem. This is a nice picture. Here's an 8-year-old boy who's telling his older sister what to do. Finally, southern India, equatorial India. Very hot and oceans everywhere. A live cricket match. And to eastern India, to the Ganges Delta, rivers and animals everywhere. South Africa.
Solitaire.
Solitaire. Cambodia. $300 children on one computer.
Okay, let's give away some goodies. Use division to share them fairly.
Near the Vietnam border. Four years passed, 1 million children became computer literate in areas where there would have been nothing. We measured the process. In 9 months, groups of children given access to a computer would reach the levels of an average office secretary by themselves. We had all the numbers. It was reproducible. It would work all across the world. So this was the conclusion of 2004. Groups of children can teach themselves to use computers irrespective of who or where they are. That last line is very important, you know. Wherever they are. So now the next question that came in was, what else can they do? If they can do so many things by themselves, what else could they do by themselves? Well, I ran into a peculiar problem in the southern Indian city of Hyderabad. It's a huge sprawling city, about the same population as Sao Paulo. And it has a peculiar problem. The children need to learn English in order to get good jobs. There are thousands of little private schools that promise to teach English, and they do a good job, but they can't teach one thing, which is correct English pronunciation. Because native English speakers will not go to those slums. I went to a school and bought them a computer. Into that computer, in 2002, I loaded some speech-to-text software. I called some children and I said to them, you speak into this computer. So they spoke into the computer and the computer produced complete nonsense. So the children laughed and they said, this computer doesn't understand anything. So I said, well, I'll give you an internet connection and I'll leave this computer here for 2 months. You have to make yourselves understood. The children said, how do I do that? And I said, well, I have no idea. And anyway, I'm going away. I left them for a couple of months. When I came back after 2 months, I met a little boy outside his classroom and I asked him in English, how are you? And he said to me, fantastic. So I said, well, what's happening inside? What they had done is, they had downloaded a piece of software called the Speaking Oxford Dictionary. When you type a word into the Speaking Oxford Dictionary, it pronounces it correctly for you. The children would listen to the pronunciation, practice it with themselves, speak it back into the speech-to-text, and see if the correct word was appearing. In other words, they had not only solved the problem, but they had figured out the method for solving the problem. This is not supposed to happen in education. The teacher is supposed to provide the method, the learner is supposed to use the method. Here, the teacher had said, I don't know, and I'm going away. And the children had figured it out themselves. Here's a brief glimpse of a practice session there.
Good evening.
Nice to meet you.
Good evening.
Good afternoon.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
Well, if you could hear the audio, then you could see him trying different accents. And I brought this photograph of this girl because she was then quite young, but now she is about 22 or 23 years old. And some of you might have spoken to her because she works for a call center and might have overcharged your credit card. So at that point, we had a second conclusion. Groups of children can achieve educational objectives by themselves if they want to. So at this point, the question that came to my mind was, how far can this go? And when I discussed this with staff at Newcastle University, we decided that we would design an experiment that is designed to fail. Here is the research question. Can Tamil-speaking children, Tamil is a South Indian language, can Tamil-speaking children in an Indian village learn the biotechnology of DNA replication in English by themselves? And I thought, well, the answer is no, because I'll give them a test, they'll get 0. I'll let them practice for a while, I'll give them another test, they'll get another 0. I'll go back to Newcastle and I'll say we need teachers. I found a village called Kalikuppam. Kalikuppam, the school had been destroyed by the Asian tsunami. And I had given the children 2 hole-in-the-wall computers on which they used to play games. On those computers, I loaded biotechnology material from the internet in English, called some children and said to them, this is all very interesting, very important, but it's all in English. So the children looked at it and said, this is very difficult. It's big English words, it's chemistry. How can we understand anything like this? So I said, well, I don't know, and I think I'll go away. I left them with that problem for 2 months. When I pre-tested them, they got a 0, as expected. When I came back after 2 months, I called the children again. They came in and said, we have understood nothing. So I said, well, there it is. But I asked them, how many times did you look before you decided that you understood nothing? So they said, we look at it every day. So I said, you have this screen on which you can't understand anything, and you keep looking at it every day. What for? So then this girl whose ribbon you can see, she was 12 years old at that time. She said to me in broken Tamil and English, and your interpreters will have to interpret this very, very carefully. She said to me, apart from the fact that improper replication of the DNA molecule causes genetic disease, we have understood nothing else. So I thought, this is very odd. And I post-tested them. When I post-tested them, I got an educational impossibility. From 0 to 30% in 2 months, without a teacher, in the tropical heat, outdoors, in a language that they don't know, on a machine that they are not very familiar with, the biotechnology of DNA. Impossible, but it had happened. But then this is not good enough, because this is still a fail. 30% is a fail. How do I make them pass? I can't get a teacher there. So I looked and I found a young girl, 23 years old, who didn't know anything about chemistry, but she was a good friend of the children. I asked this girl, can you teach them a little more so that they get 50%? She said, no, because I don't understand what they're doing. I said, use the method of the grandmother. So they said, what's that? So I said, stand behind them. Whenever they do anything, say to them, fantastic. When I was your age, I could have never done this. This is just incredible. Can you do more of it? And so on. She did this for 2 more months. The scores went up to 50%, same as a posh private school of New Delhi with a trained biotechnology teacher. I knew at that time that there was a new method that was waiting to be used. I came back to Newcastle with a conclusion which some people don't particularly like. Groups of children in the presence of a friendly but not necessarily knowledgeable mediator can learn anything by themselves. So what does that mean for education? In 2006, we started a set of experiments to see how well this would work. First of all, I put out a call in the newspaper, in the Guardian newspaper in the UK, saying that if you are a British grandmother, if you have access to the internet and a web camera, and if you can give me 1 hour of your time every week, then please write to me. 200 mostly retired, mostly school teachers, mostly women, replied within a few weeks. They formed what in my university is called the granny cloud. The granny cloud sits on the internet. Whenever there is a school in trouble, we beam them over Skype into that school. They form the mediator out of the internet. So what's the new method about? You need children, you need groups, very important, you need groups. Individuals don't work as well as groups. You need the internet, of course, you need broadband. You need the granny cloud if you don't have a teacher. And you need big questions. If you don't have a big question, the children don't get engaged. Here's a glimpse of England.
You can. You can't catch me. You say it. You can't catch me. I'm the gingerbread man. Well done. Very good. So again.
So then I started to get email from all over the world saying, can you show how this method works? So here are some little examples here. Hong Kong, China in 2011. How does an iPad know where it is? Children investigating it will tell you that it uses 3 satellites. If you ask them why they use 3 satellites, they'll tell you it uses trigonometry. If you ask them what is trigonometry, they will say, I don't know. If you tell them, would you like to know? They will say yes. Remember I told you if you went into a class and said, I'm going to teach the tangent of an angle, everybody falls asleep. But if you go into the same class and say, I'll tell you how an iPad knows where it is, they don't fall asleep. So you convert the subject into a question. Montevideo, can trees think? Oh, the children love that question. Can trees think? How can trees think? They don't have a brain. So well, find out if can trees think. I don't know if anybody here knows the answer. If you find out, you'll be very surprised. Santiago, Chile, where did language come from? So the Spanish-speaking children, they said, what do you mean? I said, monkeys don't talk. How come human beings make little noises at each other and we understand what's happening? So they investigated. 9-year-olds in Chile, Talca in Chile actually, and they came up with an answer. They said animal sounds become words. In order to join words together, you need a grammar. Words and grammar together forms a language. 9-year-olds, the 21st century, and the cloud. Turin, Italy, 2010. What did Pythagoras find? They got to work, they quickly got to Pythagoras' theorem, and they said, well, that's very easy. This is what it is. So I said, well, so what's interesting about it? They said, if you use Pythagoras' theorem, then you get to something called the Lorentz transformation. I said, what's that? And they said, haven't you heard of the special theory of relativity? And I said, I don't think you should be talking about that now. These were 9-year-olds. And they said, why not? Washington, D.C., USA. Why does red go with black? Why is it considered very sexy, a red shirt and black pants, and not a red shirt and parrot green pants? Well, I don't know if you know the answer. They found the answer out. And it's a deep anthropological answer. You would be really surprised to know that answer. Gates said, England, what are fractals? Well, they investigated it for a while. They found nice shapes and everything. But about a week later, a mother called and said, what exactly are they doing in school? I said, why? So she said, because my son was eating a pineapple and he stopped and said, Mom, the skin is a fractal. What was he talking about? I said, don't worry about it. New Delhi, India, a very poor area where most of the mothers are household servants. They researched what are household robots. And I thought they would say, household robots are not good because they will take away my mother's job. But they didn't actually say that. They found out what household robots were, and they said they're very important. I said, why? They said, because if we have household robots, then my mother will not have to be a maid. Good answer. Yesterday in Sao Paulo, I went to one of your districts, pretty rough area, and I had a group of children to whom I asked a question. Actually, today morning, I asked a question. Why do we dream? So they worked on it for a while, and guess what they came up with? They said, you know, dreams are caused by the mind, and a psychologist called Sigmund Freud figured out how to interpret them. But recent neurological data seems to contradict what he said. I thought that was quite a lot coming from 10-year-olds in that community. So this then is what this method is all about. Big questions, and a big research question for all of us, particularly for me, posed by Nicholas Negroponte. Can children learn to read by themselves? Because if they can learn to read by themselves, all they need is reading comprehension, a way to search the internet, and having searched, to form an opinion. We don't really need much schooling other than that. So I bring you back to that curve. If we could bring curricular material into the interesting but not relevant section of that diagram, education will take care of itself. If education is a process of self-organization like it's happening over here, then learning will be emergent. And in that understanding, most likely, will lie the future of learning. Thanks very much.
To understand the questions, okay? Because the translators, yeah. We have 15. Gente, nós temos 15 minutos para pergunta. Se alguém quiser perguntar alguma coisa, tem microfone aí, Lu? Como é que tá? Para poder fazer uma pergunta, tem que fazer em português para o tradutor poder traduzir para ele e poder fechar. Quem quer fazer pergunta? Tá ok? Espera só um pouquinho, deixa ele testar. Já tá? It's okay?
Yes, I need a bit of volume. I'm just figuring that out.
Um pouco mais de volume aqui para ele não está conseguindo escutar bem. Ok? A pergunta, por favor.
Um professor, ele pode ser completamente substituído por um computador, por uma máquina, um tablet?
Entendeu? Did you understand?
Just a second. Let me get the volume right. Volume, okay. Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah? Did you understand?
No, just repeat the question again, please.
Ela perguntou se um professor pode ser substituído por uma máquina.
Well, I would think that the answer is that a teacher that can be replaced by a machine should be.
Você tem a prova de tudo isso, de que isso tudo pode acontecer. Eu quero saber por que tipo assim, não tem tanto investimento, pelo visto, no seu trabalho, nas suas coisas. Por que os órgãos ainda não estão investindo tanto em você, sendo que isso é provado, como você está fazendo agora?
It's very difficult to cause a change in educational policy because it is not politically correct. If you go to a parent and say that your child is going to learn by himself, the parent is likely to say, why should I pay you? Until we can change that mindset, the official policy will not change. I spoke to the British government. What they said is, you can only make this happen bottom upwards. It will never happen top downwards. So we need the telecom companies to bring in the broadband, give it to the teachers at the bottom of the pyramid, and watch the change happen.
Boa noite. Aqui, do lado esquerdo dele. Eu sou professor e a gente vê uma diferença muito grande entre duas gerações de professores, onde os mais antigos temem a inclusão da tecnologia e boa parte dos mais novos percebem que a função do professor mudou, que não é, como você mesmo disse, entregar o método e tudo para o aluno. Nós somos mediadores. A minha pergunta é, se ao longo das suas pesquisas, você encontrou resistência dos professores dentro das instituições de ensino para que pudessem ser realizadas todos esses experimentos que foram feitos?
Yes, I have found teachers who are resistant, but the good news is that I've also found teachers who have said this is fantastic. There is a teacher in Australia with 40 years of experience who wrote to me and said, why didn't somebody tell me this before? So we have both kinds. We need to put the method into the school and hope that at least one teacher will pick it up. If one teacher picks it up in the school, it's only a question of time before everybody else does. Because they can see that it works and they can see that their jobs are not at threat. Their job is only different.
Okay. Good afternoon. I will try to speak in English because I don't speak Portuguese. I'm from Colombia, and I want an advice from you, Professor.
He's making the question in English.
Wait, I've lost your channel.
No, because I'm not speaking in English.
I can translate for you.
I'm speaking English.
Okay. I think I've got the channel. Can you just repeat the question again, please?
I don't speak Portuguese. I speak Spanish. I'm from Colombia.
Oh, okay. Fantastic. All right.
Eu vou fazer a pergunta em português.
quiero es primero felicitarlo por la presentación y segundo es preguntar.
Primeiro, ele quer te parabenizar pela apresentação. E ele quer saber, ele gostaria de ouvir um pouco da sua experiência sobre como utilizar a tecnologia para a formação profissional de jovens. Porque esse é um projeto com o qual eles trabalham na Colômbia, ele é colombiano.
When you work with people over 18 years of age, this method needs a little modification. Young adults don't behave the same way as groups of children, because in a group they are worried about making a fool of themselves in front of others. So if you have a group of 4 strangers, the method doesn't work very well. But if you have a group of 4 friends, then it does work. So when I work with children below the age of 12, I ask them to make their own groups. If you are working with over 18s, you have to ask them to work with their friends. And you have to make sure that there is no clash of egos. Then it will work.
Oi, aqui. Você tem alguma experiência com crianças com deficiência, seja deficiência visual, auditiva ou síndrome de Down?
No, I don't have experience with a school of only that kind of children. However, I do have experience with schools where we've had autistic children working with normal children. And the method works perfectly well. The children actually help the autistic child to join in. And the nature of autism is such that often the autistic child is actually better at searching and understanding things than the other children are. So in the process, his own self-confidence rises a lot. But we do need more work in this area.
Pode falar? Oi, aqui, ó. Professora aqui. Bom, eu queria uma questãozinha rápida. Quantos países você fez esses experimentos? Todos esses experimentos, quantos países? E eu queria saber como que a tecnologia ajuda a estabelecer os valores. Achei um pouco complicado essa questão de valores, de eles aprenderem através apenas da tecnologia uma série de valores que a gente, inclusive, não consegue ter métodos de ensino eficientes ou que sejam aplicados na educação.
Well, for the first part of your question, how many countries have lost count? Actually, it's about 6 countries in Africa, 4 countries in Asia, England, British Islands, Italy, Spain, Portugal, Norway, Denmark, United States, Canada, Chile, Uruguay, Buenos Aires, Argentina, and of course right here in Brazil now. So it's a lot of countries. I think lots of countries now know what it's all about, and they adapt the method to their own use. The second issue about values, the first problem is that apart from technology, forget about technology, who teaches values now? And with what efficiency? Sometimes people ask me, won't children learn wrong things from the internet? And I asked them, can you tell me one wrong thing that you can find on the internet? You know, the internet is a self-correcting, self-organizing network. Most errors get eliminated by themselves, except for two areas, politics and religion. I tell children to stay away from those. Where will belief systems come from? From science, I think. From the methods of science, from the methods of belief that science teaches, which is using reason to believe things. When it comes to behavioral norms, working together on computers helps the children an enormous amount to learn how to discuss and debate with each other. They learn that information cannot be obtained by force. It can only be shared. So I think that they do learn a set of values which are pertinent to their present situation in the 21st century. Is that all? I don't know.
Professor Sugata, parabéns pelo trabalho. Eu sou educador também lá da casa do Zezinho, no Parque Santo Antônio, onde você esteve hoje de manhã. E eu queria entender, saber a sua impressão. Nós realizamos um trabalho lá com muitos jovens, adolescentes, usando internet e mídias sociais, para que eles possam se expressar também na internet. Mostrar um pouco o que eles são, o que eles pensam, o que eles sonham, né? E nós notamos pouca diferença, quase nenhuma diferença entre os jovens lá da periferia de São Paulo, com jovens aqui de uma região, por exemplo, mais bem atendida. E eu acredito que o estudo que o senhor faz comprova que essa parte social não tem diferença nenhuma. A tecnologia é uma mola propulsora realmente revolucionária para a educação de qualquer jovem. Queria saber se o senhor comprovou esse pensamento e esse feeling nos estudos.
Children below the age of 13, 12 or 13, which means children in the age of 0 to 12, seem to be absolutely identical in every country on this planet and every socio-economic category. When adolescence sets in, everything changes. Then they begin to decide who is rich, who is poor, who is good, who is bad, etc. If you want to make real positive social change, the money has to go to education below 12 and particularly to the education of girls below the age of 12. Because when you change a girl, you change a whole generation. There is plenty of data to show that a girl will not let her child be less educated than herself if she can possibly help it.
Nós vamos fazer as 3 últimas perguntas de uma vez para encerrar aqui.
A gente está num evento que promove a inovação. Eu queria saber como que essa educação que o senhor estava falando estimula a mente criativa, estimula as pessoas a pensarem de uma forma que possa agregar mais à sociedade.
Pode falar.
Já faço.
Okay. Can you just tell me the question one more time, please?
Então, hoje em dia, o papel do educador passa a ser, ao invés do papel de uma autoridade, passa a ser cada vez mais o de um facilitador que, através do carisma ajuda os alunos a encontrarem por si próprios o conhecimento e depois ele funciona como um mediador para corrigir eventuais falhas de compreensão, para que depois ele estimule essas crianças a passarem o conhecimento adiante e assim sucessivamente.
Última pergunta. Última pergunta.
Yeah.
Última pergunta. Como aplicar isso a idosos? Pessoas de acima de 50 anos.
Okay. One more.
Repetindo a pergunta. A gente está num evento que promove a inovação, principalmente a inovação tecnológica, mas abrangindo outras áreas do conhecimento. Eu queria saber como que essa educação que o senhor está promovendo instiga o pensamento criativo tanto nas crianças e para o restante da vida delas, agregando ainda mais à sociedade esse pensamento.
Okay, let me take the questions one at a time. I'll take the one about the teacher's role. The teacher's role, as I said, becomes different. It doesn't go away. The teacher doesn't have to be a conduit for information to flow out, because the knowledge is everywhere. But the questions are not everywhere. Google can provide answers. Google doesn't provide questions. The teacher's art is to make the big questions. And then, as you pointed out, to take the answers from the learners and to put it all together. So yes, there is a role, and this new role has to be taught to teachers. I'm trying very hard to see how one can introduce this into teacher training programs. Unfortunately, teacher training programs haven't changed for the last 100 years. But maybe it will. What are we going to do with old people, such as myself? I say that seriously. As you can see, the solution is very simple. Put old people together with very young people. If an 80-year-old woman wants to learn how to use Skype, the best person to teach her is an 8-year-old. Okay? I've seen that happen, with the 8-year-old telling her grandmother, "What are you, a fool or what?" And the grandmother nodding very seriously. That method, try that method, it works wonderfully well. Creativity. Well, who knows where human creativity comes from? But we do know one or two things about creativity. People don't like to look at it that way. For creativity to happen, you need money and you need leisure. Creativity doesn't happen if you're working on a 9 to 6 job every day and your boss comes in every 2 hours and say, "Be creative." Okay? Employers have to think of how you can invest with a bit of money and lots of time and hope that it will come out of the system. It's not an unknown method. I asked the Vice Chancellor of Newcastle University, how come you don't have any rules for professors? You know, we don't have any rules. We can come and go when we like. We can teach if we want. We can not teach if we don't want. We can take holidays whenever we want. I said, how can you afford this? And he said, I have 700 professors. I am willing to pay their salaries for their entire lifetime, hoping that 7 will win the Nobel Prize. Instead of doing that with old professors, if you did it with 12-year-olds, you'll get a lot of apps.
Thank you very much. Obrigada. Muito obrigada a vocês todos. Paramos aqui. E para quem está no Educaparte, temos 3 dias aí para continuar aprofundando tudo isso, gente. Muito obrigada. Boa noite a todos.